Now let's try to do another design example with the unbraced frame. You can see this is the moment frame. We had the interior support, pen support here. That's the load and the horizontal load. So now let's take a look at here. It's actually going to be the same as the trial error method. However, since this is the unbraced, we might need to consider B2 here. So now let's take a look at here. If we try to add a pen support here to restrain the horizontal movement, are we going to have moment for the columns here? The answer is no, right? So which means if we try to brace it, the moment is actually going to be 0. So now let's see if we had m and t equals to 0, this term is already gone. So which means we only need to care about the B2. So now what we are going to do is we don't know the section yet, which means we have to kind of take a guess on the B2 for now. So I am going to go ahead and assume B2 will be 1.2 here. You can assume with different values as long as it's bigger than 1. That's going to be your start point. So now let's try to calculate the ultimate load. So let's say what is the PU and MU. So now what we are going to do is actually try to design the column here. Is that right? What is your total vertical load? It will be 60 times 10, 600 here. However, how many columns we had? Then how much will be applied to one column? That's why we need to divide by 3. So for each column, the ultimate load applied on the column will be 200K. And then let's try to calculate moment. So now let's see for each column here, who is going to create moment? Bending moment, it will be 15K here. So the total moment created by this load will be 15 times 10, 150. However, how much each column is going to have? Are we going to divide by 3 again? The answer is no. Why? This is what we had been talk about this before. This is the moment frame, is that right? And this is actually just some kind of column here which is not going to transfer the moment. Did you see that's the pen-pen connection? So which means this 150 kips feet here is only going to be shared by this 2 column here. So we are going to divide it by 2, not 3. However, remember, in order to calculate MR, we have to amplify this. So let's calculate. So now, once we find out the ultimate P and M, then we can try to pick a section. As I mentioned before, let's try the axial load first, because that's a table. You can easily find it instead of go to the chart. You know, that one will easily get lost. So let's try the W840. So we can find out the phi PN. And then we go to the table 3-10. We can find out phi MN. So once we gather all the information here, which means we can go back to the chapter H. And then we calculate the ratio between the axial load, and then we can decide which equation we are going to use. After the calculation, we had 0.4, which is bigger than the 0.2. So which means we're still going to use H1-1A first equation. And now let's plug all the values into the H1-1A, and we finally find out it's smaller than 1, which means our initial guess is okay. And we can keep moving. So does this mean we finish our design? The answer is no, because we take a guess as the 1.2. We have to check if it is really 1.2 or it will be bigger or smaller, right? We have to check our assumptions. So this is the equation for the P2, and we know alpha will be 1. So based on this problem, what is the vertical load acting on the whole story? That will be 60 times 10, 600. And now let's try to calculate the PE story. So in this equation, H is the horizontal load, so it will be 15K. And the L is going to be the story height, so that's going to be 10 feet. So now the only thing we need to calculate is delta H. And for the delta H here, we are going to use the previous example. The limit normally for the story will be L over 300. So it will be 10 feet over 300. So now let's try to calculate RM. So now let's take a look at RM calculation. So the only thing we don't know is PMF. So basically, what is the PMF? Which means the load carried by the moment frame. So now let's go back to here, and remember we try to explain here. This is the moment frame, and we had 3 columns. Each column carried 200, so we had 2 columns in the moment frame. So which means PMF here will be 400. After everything is ready, we can try to go back and calculate the PE story. Eventually I had 40-50K. Once we had this value, we can go back and try to calculate B2. And eventually I had 1.17. It's very close to my guess. So which means I actually am good for now. However, let's do a good example here. We have to go back and recalculate H1-1A. And then we go back to H1-1A equation and recalculate everything. And then you can see this value is smaller than 1, so our peak is okay. So let me summarize one more time. So it will be very similarly like before. We are going to try, if we made error, we try another one. So basically we are going to, this time for the unbraced, we are going to guess the B2 and do the following calculation. And then we have to go back and check everything.